Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Phillips Jackson Redevelopment District meeting. This is our second meeting. We had our first one back in December to talk about the objectives and the objectives of our redevelopment plan and what residents saw as the future of Phillips Jackson. Our agenda for tonight is to review the previous meeting. People gave us feedback during that meeting, so we'll share the results of that. We'll go through our TIF program as well as our existing TIF projects. What potential priorities could be made for future TIF dollars? And we'll be using an interactive website called Menti throughout the presentation. So if you go to menti.com and put in the code at the top of your screen, you'll be able to vote on different questions that we've put throughout the presentation. Just to give a little background, the Phillips Jackson Redevelopment District was established in 1993 and it runs until 2045. These numbers give you an idea of how the property values have increased during that time. This is a map of the district. As you can see, to the north, it goes up to Hume Street. On the east, it touches the river on the southernmost point. To the south, it's bordered by the railroad, and to the west by the interstate. This is some of the feedback we received in the last meeting. I'll just go through this really quickly since I think some of you were there. We asked, how would you rate Phillips Jackson's harmonious land use patterns? Everybody said good. How would you rate the redevelopment in Phillips Jackson? It was a split vote, as you can see, between great and good. We asked if Phillips Jackson has enough open space. People said no, overwhelmingly. We asked what kinds of businesses are missing in Phillips Jackson. And some of the responses we received were a grocery store, dry cleaners, a bakery, a deli, and other small retail. And with the grocery store, we weren't quite sure what people were expecting from a grocery store. So for our first Menti question, we like some clarification around that. Are you looking for a traditional supermarket like a Kroger or a Publix? Do you want fresh food shopping like Whole Foods or Sprouts? Wholesale club like Sam's Club or Costco? Or are you looking for a limited assortment like Trader Joe's or Aldi? I'll give folks a minute to vote on that. Again, the website is menti.com and the code that you put in is at the top of the screen. Give folks a few more seconds to vote and then we'll move on to the next slide. I see some people are still voting. Looks like there's a tie between fresh foods and limited assortment. All right, we're gonna move on to the next slide. This is also from the previous meeting. We asked if does Phillips Jackson have enough pedestrian friendly streets? Most people said no. And we asked, how would you rate Phillips Jackson's preservation of historic structures? As you can see, it was a pretty diverse vote there with differing opinions. And we also asked what we can do to continue improving Phillips Jackson. We heard safer crosswalks with signals and striping on the streets, repairing the street lighting, more public trash receptacles, and fewer telephone and power lines to reduce clutter. And for the clutter on the sidewalks, this is a ranking. And you can choose only those things that you think are relevant. You don't have to rank all of them. To tell us what is cluttering the sidewalks in Phillips Jackson. Is it that they're not wide enough? Is it that there are too many poles when you're walking? Are there old newspaper stands that need to be removed? What is happening in Phillips Jackson that makes the sidewalks feel cluttered? And I'll give you a minute to fill this out since it has multiple options. All right, we have votes coming in. And again, you don't have to select everything, just those things you think are relevant. So we have sidewalks not wide enough, poles, power and telephone poles, and signage. Give you a couple more minutes. All right, if everyone's done, we will move on to the next slide. Oh, there's one more. Oh, now we have power and telephone poles is first and sidewalks not wide enough is second. Thanks, folks. We'll move on to the next slide. And I'll hand this over to my colleague, Matt Loftus. He's our Assistant Director in Urban Development here at MDHA, and he'll discuss our TIF program.
You can handle it. Hey, good evening, everyone. Glad you all were able to make it. So TIF is one of the main features of our redevelopment districts. It's an important tool that City of Nashville has in our tool belt. It's commonly used around the nation, and cities of our size and larger and smaller cities as well use it. TIF essentially is, which stands for tax increment financing, it's a public financing tool that utilizes the future gains in property taxes to subsidize current improvements. So we were able to actually take out a loan, invest in a project, and then that investment will cause the project to increase in value. Thus, its property tax revenues will increase, and then we will be able to repay our debt through the incremental addition of property taxes that are generated now on the site. And so it's based on a notion that this upfront investment in an area by a government agency will actually generate increased property taxes for the taxing jurisdiction in future years. So it can pay for itself in that way. In Nashville, MDHA's TIF can only be used within our specific redevelopment districts, those that are managed by MDHA. And there's also the ability within the mayor's office, although it is more rare. So the considerations for a project receiving TIF, each redevelopment district has an associated plan that goes along with it, and that plan identifies goals of the district. And one of the things that this meeting is doing is making sure that the goals and the priorities within our districts are still aligned with what the residents and property owners of these areas are hoping to see. And so we need to, when evaluating the merits of a specific TIF project, we want to see that it's making a significant contribution to the goals of the district, that it's hitting on some of the points that we've highlighted as things that we're looking to accomplish in a particular area. Another consideration is, will this project further stimulate or catalyze additional development within the district? So those are our two of our biggest considerations. And then, of course, once the TIF loan is repaid, Metro collects 100% of all the tax revenues from that parcel going forward. And we have historically used TIF in a couple of ways. The first, which has been sort of the overwhelming use of TIF, has been to support the development in one particular parcel or one particular project. So we will, again, we'll take out a loan, invest in a particular parcel. And as that gains value, as it grows in value, we'll be able to repay the debt from our loan through the incremental property taxes. And so it's just a parcel by parcel sort of an approach. We also have the ability to invest in area-wide improvements. So examples of this are usually infrastructure or green space. And when this is done, we'll absorb future property tax growth from several different parcels that are impacted by that improvement. So the amount of TIF that's potentially available to any particular development, it's restricted by essentially what we foresee the property value to growth to be, as well as long as it hits on one of our eligible uses of TIF. The state actually has a list of eligible uses that's here on this slide. Things of land acquisition, clearance, relocation, public infrastructure, parks and public space, parking garages, green initiatives, and any associated planning or administration costs. And we'll jump into some examples of how TIF has been used in this district. And we tried to cover a pretty diverse usage of TIF here.
Thanks, Matt. First up is the First Horizon Park, where the Nashville Sounds play. In 2013, Metro decided it wanted to build a new ballpark, a new baseball park, over off of South Jefferson. What is the south of Jefferson Street, and they used TIF to make that happen. So this is an example of one of our Metro-driven TIF projects. We have the row 8.9 condos, which are on Rosa Parks Boulevard, right across from the farmers market. These were built in 2002 with 29 townhomes. And at that time, it was the first large-scale development that had taken place in Hope Gardens. It was formerly a used car lot, which was an underutilized land use. And we added 24-hour residents to it, which helped that area begin its expansion. I think most people are familiar with the Kroger on Monroe that was built in 1994. That was actually part of the state's development of the Bicentennial Mall, and it became the full service grocery for that area. These are the Worthing Mills Lofts that were built in 2003 with 370 residential units. This is an example of TIF financing historic preservation, because this was formerly a Worthing Mills industrial building, or a collection of buildings dating back to 1869. And finally, we have the Jefferson Street Lofts that were built in 2008. It's a 71 unit apartment building for low and moderate income households. And there's some a small corner retail space in that development as well. So in thinking about previous projects and thinking about what you said, what you told us in the last meeting that Phillips Jackson needs, how would you rank the future priorities of TIF? So we're asking, when we sit down and we set our goals for the next 10 years, 10 years, what should we consider when we're looking at potential TIF projects in Phillips Jackson? And this again is another ranking on Menti. Tell us what you think is most important and what you think is least important in terms of setting TIF priorities going forward. I'll give you a minute to think about it. I know it's a lot to take in at once. But on this one, I do ask that you rank all of the ones that you think are important. All right, we got votes coming in. So far, we have affordable housing as the most important and small retail as the second most important. We have small retail and historic preservation tied at second and third. They look like they have about the same amount of votes. Give you a couple more minutes to submit. I know this one is a little bit more involved than our other questions. So it looks like it'll be affordable housing, small retail, historic preservation. Oh, we got another vote in. Same order. Infrastructure, mom and pop stores, grocery store, and business incubator. Thank you for that info. We will take it under consideration when we're looking at future TIF projects. And if you were not at the last meeting or you didn't get a chance to submit your contact information, you can do so now. We're the only ones who will see your information. If you submitted it at the last meeting, we still have that, and you should have received an email about this meeting tonight. But if you would like to receive emails in the future, please submit your info and we will add you to the email list. All right, we'll move on to the next slide. This is my contact information. You can reach out to me directly. I'm Shara Taylor. I do respond to emails and I do pick up my phone. So if you reach out to me, we will connect. So feel free if you have any questions or any follow-up thoughts to contact me directly. So.
Good evening, Joe Kane with MDHA. Thank you very much for participating tonight. This is the first of a series that we are undertaking right now to try and get everybody's feedback as to what their desires are inside their neighborhood. Metro Council a couple of years ago took a look at tax increment financing across the county, not including what MDHA, and not only including what MDHA does, but also the city as a whole is still something of interest that they are doing, and trying to see where they're getting their most bang for the buck, as all of us as taxpayers are concerned about and want to make sure what's going on. And so this is the first series to talk about how things are, how you see things presently, what you want to see in the future. And then we're going to take that. Those are some things that we will ultimately start presenting to Metro Council late this spring. Along with that will be some ideas of what our future desires will be for tax increment financing, future projects inside the redevelopment districts. We'll also start having some information about tax increment financing, how it works in the community, how it works for small developers, what can be done with that to promote these priorities that you are outlining here tonight. And so this is just a step in the overall process that we're going to be doing throughout this spring. And we have a small group in here, and I'd be glad to open up for any questions that anybody may have. You just raise your hand, or and Cheryl will let you in, and we'll be glad to talk.
And you're able to unmute yourselves now.
I'd like to ask if there's a time frame for developing these priorities.
We work at the speed of the private sector generally. MDHA does not have we do not have a land bank where we have 20 acres or 5 acres or even 1 acre sitting around that says, all right, we want to go out and get this developed. That is not one of the things that is not one of the ways that the city has been reacting historically in the past. That has happened a few times with the Industrial Development Board, where they have had, developed an entire industrial site and then brought in people to develop accordingly. But that is not the case inside of our redevelopment districts. We are working in improved areas where there's little availability of some land. There's lots, oftentimes there's underdeveloped property that is in the area that is ripe for redevelopment. And our tax increment financing and the redevelopment plan are the tools that we help induce the private sector into making that take place. So there's not a time frame per se that says we want this, we're going to accomplish this by next year. That's not how we can lay that out. What we are laying out is saying these are our priorities for the next 5 to 7 years that we would, or up to 10 years that we would like to see done.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name's Pam. I live in Hope Gardens. And I view the scattered public housing duplexes in our neighborhood as a real positive, and wondered if MDHA in the city does as well.
We do, of course. Those were there before Hope Gardens came along. We went through a few years ago to renovate those. Thank you very much for complimenting them. I know we have had some problems before with some types of with some particular tenants that were in there that were not necessarily falling in line, and sometimes parking their cars in the yard, and we try to straighten those things out to make that much more neighborly oriented in there. And so thank you for complimenting them. We have over 300 scatter sites across the county. That includes single family and some duplexes as well. And so no, we very much think that it is part of our mission of providing affordable housing to citizens in Nashville.
I think somebody else had unmuted. Okay.
So I have a question in regards to, I guess, what's viewed as a detractor and some of the existing businesses or locations. Is there any specific areas that are of a higher degree of focus for the project?
You stated as a detractor. No, from our point of view, not so much, again, because we're not going in and acquiring property. We're not going in and taking people's property to try and get a project completed. But those projects, we have stepped in and we have worked with people on private development. The 942 Jefferson Street at 10th and Jefferson, that was some property as an old car wash that we worked with a private developer to try and turn into a new, much more productive and community oriented business over there as well. And then our own project at 10th and Jefferson, was a lot of vacant property that we worked with. So we are trying to work on those properties that are most needed. Those also seem to be the ones that the private sector is looking at to say, hey, you know, let me see what we can do here to work from. And those we are, like I said, we are enthusiastic about redeveloping those, but we're not targeting them specifically to say we're going to try and acquire those properties.
And last question, in terms of, I guess, the improvement of existing properties within this zone, is there any new zoning restrictions or additional hurdles that the homeowners are going to have to go through to be in line with whatever the project's goals are?
Well, we do have some design guidelines that are put in place. Hope Gardens was the first ones that were done, and the prime example of the design guidelines that were put in place in there. And that's why you see the quality of properties inside there. On the north side, Germantown area, we work very, very closely with the Historic Commission. We have a joint review process that we work through with the design of those properties and what that will be. And so we do have design guidelines that people need to, and developers and even property owners who are renovating their houses have to follow as part of that. And we keep those available. They're on our website as to what we're expecting as part of the redevelopment. Those design guidelines were done obviously in years past so that we now see where they are. And we have an independent design review committee that reviews those, and we meet twice a month. We have a dozen redevelopment districts across the county, and we meet twice a month to discuss any proposed projects the developer or property owner brings to us.
So just to confirm, those are existing guidelines, and there's no plan for new guidelines for any zoning requirements. Is that correct?
At this time, we don't have any. This area is fairly well developed, and what is in between what we have on design guidelines, what the Historic Commission has on design guidelines, and what the zoning has under the downtown code, that pretty well envelops most of the Phillips Jackson area. And so those controls have it pretty well outlined procedures to follow.
I think Greg Little had a question.
Yes, thank you. First off, thanks for putting on this meeting. It's very helpful, especially for those of us that are newer to the neighborhood. I was just wondering if there is any kind of vision master planning exercise that'll go along with this, especially for larger key parcels that are kind of, ripe for development. I'm thinking of kind of the area near Kroger, especially that whole Kroger itself. That style of development seems like it usually redevelops right around now with the way things are going. If there's any kind of plan that's going to be associated with what we're doing now.
What we are seeing is the plans are moving towards a specific plan through the planning department, through the Metropolitan Planning Commission. You've probably heard of the new project taking place at 4th and Jefferson. Hill Realty is doing a kind of downsized Hill Center over in there. They're actually proposing as part of it, it was announced that part of that will be a new grocery store as well, to come into that mixed use development. But what we are seeing is that the private sector is coming in with a mixed with a proposal that requires an SP zoning. Your council member is pretty active in getting developers who are requesting zone changes to get them out to meet with the community as well. And of course, any SP zone change would go through the Planning Commission with the public hearing on it, as well as through Metro Council with the public hearing on it. From our perspective as MDHA, when those zone changes are coming up, we're looking at them for compatibility primarily on land use. We take a look at the design when the design comes through, But as far as planning, we're not out there doing actual planning on what the design will be. That's being handled more through the planning department on that side.
All right, thank you very much.
I think I saw Claudette Stager or Stager unmute. Do you have a question?
Well, if we don't have any more questions, we'd like to thank you for participating. It took us well, we were kind of close to the holidays, but it took us about a week to 10 days to get a summary of the meeting, as well as we will post the results of the Mentimeter. And this is being recorded and will be posted on our website as well. If you have sent us your email, then Shara will send out to you and say, you know, it's up and it's posted, and give you the direct link to it. Otherwise, you'll be able to find it on our website. Any other of your neighbors, they will be able to visit this on our website as well and see that. But I would think we would probably need about 10 days probably before it gets up. Now that we've done it, we ought to be able to cut that time down a little bit. The first time we were putting stuff up is the first time in about 6 months. And so it took us a little hoops to jump through, but now it should be even more practice to be able to get it up, hopefully within that 7 to 10 days.
Claudette, did you have a question?
No, I didn't have a question. It
Okay.
wasn't me.
No.
All right.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And we will let you know the results and where we think this will be going next. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
All right.